Okay, let's unpack this. We've got some interesting material here, all about how businesses can, really step up their game on convenience and accessibility.
Right. And there's a strong focus on physical spaces, especially washrooms.
Exactly. These sources have some great tips, insights into creating these, well, truly inclusive environments. And they talk a lot about this concept called the universal washroom.
Yeah, and our mission here for this deep dive is really to pull out the most crucial bits from all this, give you the shortcut, basically, to getting why this matters, and importantly, how businesses can actually make these changes.
Absolutely. And just before we dive in, this deep dive is brought to you by Handy Washroom Direct. Okay, so getting into the material, this core idea pops up right away, creating a work environment, a business setup where everyone can participate without stress.
Yeah, it's presented not just as like a compliance thing, but really fundamental to being a successful, welcoming place.
Right, and it seems more organizations are getting on board.
Definitely. They're adopting what the sources call disabled-friendly ideas. And one powerful point is how sometimes quite simple modifications can make a huge difference.
How so?
Well, for individuals, growing skills, gaining independence at work, it helps blend that work ethic with a genuinely inclusive culture.
That makes sense. And one source actually lists things that can make people feel unwelcome.
Yeah, it's not always the obvious stuff.
No, it mentions physical barriers, of course, but also things like maybe a perceived lack of sympathy. Or coworkers not really understanding the nature of a disability. Even unsuitable furniture comes up.
That list really shows it's broader than just, ramps and doors. It's the whole environment, the culture, too.
And crucially, these changes aren't just for employees.
No, absolutely not. They improve things for customers, too. Big time.
It genuinely opens the doors wider, doesn't
And
it?
everyone in the community, yeah.
So, okay, beyond that cultural aspect, the sources get into concrete, physical changes, starting with the general workspace, even before we zero in on washrooms.
Yes, they list several practical changes for convenience. Things like installing ramps next to stairs.
It seems basic.
It does, but they add the detail about proper handle arrangements.
Oh, okay.
It's the support with the ramp that makes it work for many people.
Right, and elevators, too.
Key point. And specific features are highlighted, like braille code call buttons.
And voice synthesizers.
Exactly. Imagine the difference for someone who's blind. It goes from being a confusing box to something navigable.
Total.
They also mention having extra wheelchairs available.
Just on hand.
Yeah, and investing in disability-friendly furniture. The example they give is adjustable height tables.
Oh, right. So you can customize your own space.
For comfort, for efficiency. Makes a difference.
I thought the bit about storage was interesting, too.
What was that?
Rack cupboards, drawers, designed to be flexible, mobile, lightweight.
Ah, yes. It's about removing those little bits of physical effort,
Those small frictions in the day.
Exactly. But like you said, the sources really do lean into the importance of accessible bathrooms.
They really do. This material makes it super clear. An accessible washroom isn't optional.
No, it's fundamental.
For many disabled individuals, knowing that basic need is met easily and comfortably.
It's essential for confidence, for independence outside the home, whether that's work or just being a customer.
And this brings us to that concept, the universal washroom.
Yeah, one source really spotlights this. It's presented as a popular and increasingly standard way to go for commercial remodels.
And I liked how they define universal.
How so?
Simple, really. It accommodates many people's needs without needing separate labels or facilities.
Designed for everyone from the start.
Exactly.
That's the core idea. A universal washroom, as they describe it, is built to be accessible to, everyone. It has features for a whole range of needs, wheelchair users needing turning space, people with visual impairments, or even just someone who's a bit unsteady and needs grab bars.
And the flexibility seems key. Any gender, any physical ability can use them.
Right. One source mentions the Ontario Building Code, defining the purpose just like that, access for everyone without worry about gender norms or different physical needs.
And where are we seeing these pop up?
It's becoming pretty common. Public buildings, obviously government offices, malls, libraries, arenas.
Makes sense.
Large retail stores, too. And businesses maybe with high foot traffic, but limited space for, separate men's, women's, and accessible facilities.
So it's moving towards being the standard.
Seems like it. The material notes the Ontario Building Code now actually requires them in new builds and major renovations meeting certain standards.
Wow. Okay, so it's baked into the regulations now. in some places at least.
Which signals that shift, right? Towards proactive, inclusive design, not just adding things on later.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts then. How do they actually work? What are the specific features that make these universal washrooms accessible and useful for so many different people?
Right. The sources get quite detailed. Grab bars are a given, obviously, placed strategically.
Standard stuff.
But it's more than that. Toilets, for instance, are often positioned a bit higher than standard.
Why is that?
Makes transferring from a wheelchair much easier, less of a drop.
Okay. And sinks.
Set at a height that works for wheelchair users, and crucially, usually without cabinets underneath.
So you can get right up close.
Exactly. Comfortably.
What else?
Floor drains are mentioned, designed to stop puddles forming. That's a safety thing for wheelchairs or walkers.
Never thought of that.
And while you might have toilets and maybe urinals, the big difference is often the space itself.
How so?
Think large individual private rooms designed for maximum maneuverability, sometimes big enough for a user and a caretaker.
Ah, okay. So it's not like stalls without partitions, because that sounded chaotic.
No, definitely not. More like individual, roomy, private suites. Movement isn't restricted, like in a narrow stall.
Got it. That makes much more sense.
And one source lists even more specifics for bathroom design.
Like what?
Wider doors. Foundational, really, for wheelchairs.
Makes sense.
They elaborate on support bars near the toilet, mentioning proper distance, maybe even overhead options.
And that's not just for wheelchairs.
No, crucial for anyone with weaker legs or reduced mobility. Helps with sitting down, standing up.
So that slightly higher toilet seat comes up again.
Yep, reinforced is key. And sensor faucets get a mention, too.
For hygiene?
Hygiene, yes, but also just removing one more physical barrier or fiddly task.
Right, these little details add up.
They do. And then there's something highlighted as increasingly essential, the adult changing table.
Or special needs changing.
That's like...
Okay, this is beyond typical washroom functions, isn't it?
Yeah, significantly.
Yeah.
These are for people who need help changing clothes, maybe managing bandages, or other personal care that needs more space, maybe lying down support.
Right, I see.
And the features reflect that. Adjustable height, safety rails are crucial.
For security.
Security, yeah, and also helping with transfers onto or off the table. And good sanitary provisions, of course.
It really acknowledges a wider range of care needs.
Needs that often keep people at home if they can't find suitable facilities out in public or at work.
So zooming back out, after all of these details, what's the big picture benefit? Why go universal?
The clearest benefit, hammered home in the material, is making sure your place can genuinely serve everyone.
Everyone who might walk through the door.
Exactly. Customers, employees, parents with babies needing a change, caretakers, kids, older people. Everyone.
Makes your business truly accessible.
To the widest possible group, yeah.
But businesses always think about space, cost, practicality. Did the sources touch on that?
They did. One source tackles it. Notes that universal washrooms, because they're often these larger individual rooms, can sometimes accommodate more people overall than traditional banks of stalls.
Interesting. And cost.
Not simple. Depends on the design, obviously. Could be pricier if they need more square footage or specific fixtures.
Right.
But could potentially save money compared to building, say, two separate, fully accessible traditional men's and women's rooms. It needs planning.
Right. Planning is key.
And across the board, the sources agree. A well-designed, accessible washroom just feels safer, more inviting, dignified.
Yeah, dignity comes up a lot.
Yes, and they give more design tips like, think about how many toilets you need. Maybe one large room, good for 2 users, like a person and their caretaker.
Or maybe 2 side-by-side for transfer options.
Exactly. And they reinforce that toilet height, again around 17 inches, maybe a bit lower, helps independence for those who struggle standing from low seats.
Okay, so the physical space is obviously huge.
Yeah.
But one source reminded us it's not just about the physical stuff.
No, absolutely. It broadened the scope, talked about interactive communication, active participation.
What does that look like in practice?
Things like running seminars for employees about different disabilities, education piece.
Okay.
Making sure disabled employees are actually involved in activities socially and for business.
Not sidelined.
Right. Assigning work based on skills, not assumptions. Offering upskills training for everyone.
So it really loops back to that culture piece we started with.
Totally. It reinforces that real inclusion needs both the ramps and grab bars and the understanding and culture within the business.
Makes sense.
Because these combined changes, physical and cultural, are about helping disabled individuals feel genuinely equal, valued, accepted.
And the material really drives home that this isn't just box ticking.
No, it makes a huge positive difference socially, economically, for the person and for the business.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've looked at why accessibility is just fundamental now.
Yeah, for any business.
We detailed specific physical mods for workspaces, then really dug into accessible washrooms, especially this universal concept,
Highlighting those key features, the space, the height, the support, the changing tables.
and layered on top the importance of that non-physical side, the culture, the communication.
Right. The universal washroom really stands out, though, as a design solution that embodies this shift. It creates spaces that are just inherently more flexible, more useful for a much wider range of people than old-style accessible facilities often were.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over based on all this. If designing something essential, like a washroom, specifically for the needs of users with the most significant mobility challenges, if that inherently creates a space that's more flexible, more spacious, safer, and ends up benefiting almost everyone, parents with strollers, travelers with luggage, people with temporary injuries.
There's a ripple effect.
Exactly. Then how might applying that same universal design thinking to other parts of a business, services, products, processes, unlock unexpected benefits for your entire customer base, your whole workforce?
Interesting question. Thinking beyond the physical space.
Yeah, something to chew on. And just a reminder, for more information on creating accessible spaces, you can visit handywashroom.com.